hopefully we do it again. And it's really a manifestation of great partnerships, starting with the Chester County Economic Development Council and the I2N. Marianne is the rep from there, and she's been instrumental in getting a relationship with NextFab, which brought us the printers and the training. From there, many conversations, many meetings, and a lot of thinking about how to make the biggest impact. It's really a manifestation of great partnerships.
That's a parallel universe.
So last week, I went to speak at Penn State Great Valley. The Liberty Valley Initiative did a meetup on 3D printing, and evidently Penn State Great Valley has a $2.7 million version of NextFab, and it's awesome, and hopefully we can kind of filter people over there. But what I realized is that there were 40 people at that meetup, and I feel like we could run a Walnut Street Labs for hardware, like parallel, like at night when everyone leaves here, we'll just fill it with the other side of the universe. But really, that was a fleeting thought, because we're going to merge them, because software and hardware is called Internet of Things, and we're going to tackle that hopefully tomorrow and launch something interesting. So enough of that, but shout outs to Fox Rothschild, Igniter TV, Mr. Sean Dominski, Hankin Group, Remens, and everybody who comes. Who? I2N. And all of you, regulars, and anything else? I got the green light from Ben, so let's give another round of applause to Matt. Quarter of 20 out will come out of an office, we'll take Q&A and go get the grill.
All right, thanks. Hey, I'm Matt. Thanks for coming. It's pretty full. Chris was telling me they've done about 80 of these, so I guess I have to benefit of that. So I am the UX designer, and I'm on the product team at RJ Metrics, which is a startup in Center City. And I also am one half of the Mercenary podcast, which is a thing I do on the side for fun. So what do I do at RJ Metrics? RJ Metrics is a business intelligence platform for small SaaS businesses and e-commerce companies. And basically what that means is that if you're a marketer and you're trying to wrangle a lot of data in Excel today, you are probably having a hard time because there's new data sources popping up all over the place, and data is coming in at a faster speed than ever before. So what we do is we have a pipeline that you hook up all your data sources to, and then we have a transformation engine and a dashboard where you can actually make charts. If you ever try to make a chart in Excel, it's terrible. The chart builder that we made is way better, and our customers use it every day. And my role there is basically to, as part of the product team, is really just to listen to our customers, the customer service team internally, and try to figure out what is the next thing we should do, and then figure out what is the next thing that's possible to do with the engineering team. And then once we've decided, just make sure that it gets done. So it's pretty much my responsibility for whatever project that I'm working on is a success, or if it fails, that's going to be on me. But so there's a little bit of pressure there, but it's actually a lot of fun, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The main thing I want to kind of talk about today is like my story through kind of the lens of mental health. I kind of think that entrepreneurship is more of a mental health condition than it is just a choice you make. And I also hear that a lot of people might say that being in startups is it's a roller coaster, and I kind of disagree, and I want to say that you are actually the roller coaster, and it's more of taming that side of you that is more important than actually just trying to avoid any ups and downs that you might find. So let's go back in time to 2005. So I was working a finance job. I was at Drexel. I was doing a co-op. It was in Valley Forge. And I started to realize that a lot of the things that I was doing all day were very rote. I was getting kind of bored. And I realized that at lunchtime, all I was doing was reading TechCrunch. And if you can imagine what TechCrunch was like in 2005, it was literally Michael Arrington in his bedroom yelling at people. And it was awesome because you would hear about a new company that would get started, and it would be because Kevin Rose got drunk and spilled a drink on somebody, and they had an idea or something like that, like at a party. And I was like, wow, that's all Silicon Valley is right now, and that's how people are getting funded. And it was just, I liked it because it seemed really exciting. So I was like, all right, I'll give this a shot. So Take247 is a video sharing site. And in 2005, YouTube hadn't got bought yet. So there was 1,000 video sharing sites. And the thing that was differentiated about it is that we targeted film students. And these were people that were creating videos that were higher quality. If you remember on YouTube in 2005, 2006, it was pirated clips of The Daily Show. It was that Numa guy. And it was people doing flaming shots and burning themselves. So there really wasn't any kind of like real content that you would want to pay for. It was just kind of stuff to maybe get you through the day if you were bored at work. So what we did was we created this site. I moved to New York and moved in with a bunch of NYU students. A friend of mine that I went to high school with was there. And for the most part, like Facebook was a new thing. There weren't really ways to share any of the movies that you were making in school, and you had to make a decent amount of them. And so this actually like took off in terms of film students. So if a lot of people were going for millions of users on YouTube back then, our market was probably thousands of users, and we had hundreds. So what that meant was that if you were a film student and you were at NYU, Fitchburg State College, University of Chicago, I think, and maybe Drexel, you weren't putting your videos on YouTube. You were putting them on Take247. And the reason for that was that we had the ability to IMDb tag every person that was either an actor or a crew member. So that meant that if somebody put up a video, they would also tag maybe 30 other people. It would automatically create a profile for them, and it would be building these kind of like phantom profiles of people. So whether you liked it or not, if you were in a film program, you were on the site, and it was just a matter of time before you had to claim your profile and put a picture up and actually start participating. So that was a lot of fun. We lived in an apartment in the Upper East Side, which we called the Submarine, because it was about 200 square feet. We put 5 people in it. And we just called it the Submarine because there were 2 rooms. There were 4 cubbies, and there were 2 rooms that you couldn't put a bed in, but there were ladders that went up to a mattress. So we each had one of these things. We were living on top of each other. And one of our friends just showed up from Burning Man one day and slept on the couch for like for 6 months or something like that. It was that was a wild time. We were in such close proximity that we printed out all of our use cases for this site, all the UX, and just wallpapered the walls, and all the walls were covered. So we'd have parties, and people were like, "What is on your walls?" It was the use cases for this site. We ultimately shut it down because we just really were not sure how we were going to grow it. The market for just film students was pretty low, and we really weren't sure how to monetize it. We were probably going to do some kind of local advertising, but decided that the people that I was making it with were more interested in creating films than they were about creating websites. So we decided to move on to that. The cool thing about it was we spent about $0 to make it, and the biggest business decision we would ever make, we were thinking about making, was whether or not to buy the domain filmpage.com for $1,500. I'm actually starting to regret not buying that. I feel like that was probably a pretty good domain at the time. So that is, from there, for the rest of college, I started making just freelance websites. I realized that I could do it. I worked at a marketing firm at the time, which made a lot of shampoo websites. If you've been on a shampoo website in the last 10 years, I probably made it. And from there, it wasn't until my senior year at Drexel that I actually ran into the guys that had started DevNuts. And what that was again, it was 2 guys in their apartment. And I was just doing freelance work in my apartment. And I thought, well, if we're doing the same thing, why don't we try to like join up? We'll just work out of the same apartment and start doing this. So we took DevNuts and we said, well, we wanted to start like a co-working space. We wanted to get an office space that made us look a lot bigger than we actually were. So we got a large office space that we decided to rent out to other smaller companies so we could subsidize the rent. And we started Jarvis because we thought DevNuts was
wasn't professional enough to be getting the kinds of contracts that we wanted. So we started another company just called Jarvis Innovations. And what we mostly did was mobile apps, and we were doing them in HTML5. And I don't know if you can remember in 2010, HTML5 on a phone was really challenging. We used the Sencha framework, and we were able to get a few of these apps done. One for Christie's Auction House, and the other one, I think it was Consumer Reports Mobile Shopper, 2011. They were a challenge, but we got them out, and that really kind of showed me that what seemed like an insurmountable project for a couple of kids that had just graduated college, and it was a pretty big contract. We were able to get it done. That was something that really it stuck with me, that you might as well just go for the harder challenge, because you can always just persist and get through it. I think that was a major part of what I learned doing DevNuts and Jarvis, was just that you can handle a lot more than you think. We were cash strapped, so being that I was pretty much in charge of making sure all the bills were paid on time. I was constantly losing my mind, and I'm a skinny guy, and I'm probably like 20 pounds heavier today. I learned a ton from my partners, mainly that being strategically unreasonable is a skill. And the way you do that is you have a firm set of principles that you operate under. And one of the biggest things I think I've learned is just that if you're arguing from a principle, you can beat just logic and rationale alone. So I think it's really important that you have principles and you actually write them down. I think so. A couple of mine are just personal freedom is the most valuable thing to defend. I'm kind of showing my libertarian proclivities. Better decision making begets prosperity, and better decisions are made with data. So you'll kind of understand why I work at RG Metrics today. But I will say that throughout the entire tenure at DevNuts and Jarvis, which to be honest was only about a year and a half, I think the most important lesson of the entire experience didn't really reveal itself until the very last week that I was there. And so what had happened was, basically, I realized that myself and my two founders were kind of moving in different worldview directions. And what that meant was just that there would be a decision that would be intuitive to me, which would be in one direction, and my founders, it would be intuitive to them to go in another. So what we found ourselves just kind of clashing on very basic things. And it started to become apparent to me that this is something where I'm actually going to hold them back if I stick around, because we're just going to be clashing on just basic stuff. So, I mean, it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made to leave Jarvis and DevNuts. I remember it was a rainy day in October of 2011. I sat at my desk. It was probably about 10 or 11 at night, and I realized that I was like, this is it. I have to move on. So I sent an email to my two founders because I wanted to get everything out in writing, and was just like, hey guys, this has been a really wild ride. It's been fun, but I'm gonna have to move on and do something else. And I sat there, and the thing is, I don't know if you've ever been to the DevNuts office. It's really pretty at night. And I sat there, and I just I cried. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And I remember I was like, I maxed out all my credit cards to do this. I pretty much put everything on the line. Didn't pay my student loans. I was like, this is one hole to really dig yourself out of. And to add insult to injury, I remember this week was crazy week. I remember it was 2 days later, I broke up with my girlfriend. And then the day after that, I got mugged on Broad Street. The guy took, this guy took out a knife, and he took the last $20 that I had to my name. And I was like, wow, okay. And the thing was, all I could do was just laugh. And I was like, I was reminded of, there's a philosopher named Lucius Seneca, and he kind of espoused that you should practice misfortune. Now, I wasn't exactly practicing. I was kind of just doing it. But what I realized is that I remember coming home and just being like, is this what you feared? Is this really that bad? And I realized it was like, no, this is really not that bad. I realized that I had a family that loved me. I realized that I had friends that loved me. And I also realized that I had skills that I could get out of this. So what I did was basically, actually, can you go to the next slide? Yep. I just wanted to show you. So the DevNuts office. So that's where I was when it was raining. All right, so go on to the next slide. And I just wanted to say, like, now that I've kind of I realized how valuable that was to kind of to know that everything really wasn't that bad when it seemed that bad on paper. I mean, this is why I go camping a lot more, and I go sit in a tent, and I realize you just try to practice poverty a little bit, because when you get back, that cheeseburger is the best cheeseburger you've ever had in your entire life. So, I mean, what to do now? There's no money, no company, no girlfriend. I mean, that's it, right? The next thing I did was I remembered a conversation I'd had with Bob Moore, who's the CEO of RJ Metrics. We had sponsored TEDx Philly. It was, I think, the first one at the Kimmel Center. And he was one of the speakers. And I remember going to a speaker kind of like cocktail hour and talking to him. And I remember for the CEO of a company, it was remarkable how much he listened. Because I remember our pitch for DevNuts and Jarvis at the time was like, we do all this stuff. And he actually just patiently listened to everything that I said. And that really stuck with me. I was like, wow, this guy's a really nice guy. If you ever read How to Win Friends and Influence People, that's like a #1 thing in there, is to just sit and listen to what people say. Worked on me. So I checked out their product. So RJ Metrics at the time was pretty much what I just spoke about and told you. But it didn't look like this. I looked at it and I said, oh my God, this is terrible. The UI for this must be so hard to use. They have to hire me. Actually, I felt like pain in my stomach that I was like, oh my God, I need to help fix this. But I knew that the market they're in is exploding. I thought that Bob and Jake are some of the smartest people I've ever met. And they're very nice. So I was like, all right, this is something I could get into. So I've been at RJ for the last 4 years now. They originally hired me to basically fix some of the aesthetic problems that they had, but also the usability. And it was my job in the beginning. We were like 10 people to just be responsible for design. And that really meant anything from business cards to the marketing website to the actual app design to a lot of the HTML and CSS. So I coded a lot of the good pieces of the app that still work today on the front end. But when you've been somewhere for 4 years straight, and it's not a terrible amount of time, but you start to realize that the kinds of ups and downs that you're experiencing in the past 2 projects that I just told you about, those were kind of time boxed to like under a year. And it can feel like, oh, well, this thing happened, and it's the first time it happened, and it was really challenging, and that's like, you kind of want to put like a giant milestone flag in that. But when that kind of stuff keeps happening over and over again, like while you're a startup for a while, you start to kind of realize like, wow, you don't have to feel the kinds of emotions that you felt in the past that are actually like negative and like, maybe it's fear or maybe it's frustration, because you're going to be in it for the long haul, so you have to kind of like deal with this or else you'll completely burn yourself out. So I started getting, like what I said about the being a roller coaster, I started to realize that it's actually me. And that's very liberating to start to realize that, because you realize that you're in control and you can do something about it. These aren't things that are happening to you that frustrate you, are not things that are just being thrust upon you. It's actually just how you deal with things. So I started getting interested in meditation, and that's part of what I want to talk about is just how important that is to me and what a life hack it is. And by meditation, I pretty much just mean just sitting in a chair or on the floor. We'll get to that in a sec. Sitting in a chair or on the floor and either staring or having your eyes closed for about 20 minutes at a time. The punchline for this, I guess I'll get to this in a second, but I just wanted to say that has been amazing because I started to realize that something that would initially frustrate me would just kind of dissipate. I would realize, oh, this emotion of frustration that you're feeling right now is completely useless to you, and you can just discard it. And that was like an amazing thing to realize. And honestly, like starting off, a lot of people are like, I have a hard time meditating. I have a hard time sitting and just kind of thinking or stop thinking for 20 minutes at a time. I just tell them, first off, it is agony to try to do it. And if it hurts, if it really is frustrating to do, you're probably doing it right, and you just need to keep doing it. And that's pretty much... Oh, one of the other things is like, this is actually really useful. I'm not sure where this came from, but if you start to think of yourself as kind of like being in the third person, and if something negative were to happen to you, and you kind of go, oh, wow, I wonder how Matt's going to deal with that. It starts to, like, you've completely removed yourself from it. And it works. I forget who, I think it might have been Duncan Trussell on the Joe Rogan podcast that said that, but I'm sure it comes from some body of philosophy. I do want to talk about, the Mercenary podcast. So Dan, lived with when I did Take 247, he was one of the film students. He's now a filmmaker in Hollywood. And as such, we've kind of grown apart because he's out in LA, or he's making movies all over the place, and I'm in Philadelphia. And I said, we never talk anymore. Why don't we just kind of throw something together, get some really weird people that we've met over the years. And basically we say things like this, like Ancient Aliens is one of my favorite shows because it's so ridiculous. And actually I think an even better version of Ancient Aliens is the 3-hour rebuttal to every single Ancient Aliens claim. Because you get a history lesson and you get to watch the good parts of the show. It turns out people in ancient times could really move big stones. They had ingenious ways to do it. That's basically the main thing in Ancient Aliens is this, that people can't move stones. So we've had a number of our friends. We had a friend of ours who was a pickup artist who teaches men and women how to attract the opposite sex. That was very interesting. That was our second one. We had a actual rocket scientist at Boeing, and he was talking about how difficult it is to build fuel systems in space because they tend to, I think there's one that tends to eat itself. And that was just something I had never actually considered. It's been great because it's a way for not only for me and Dan to reconnect, but to actually meet new people and have people just kind of suggested to us that we would have never met otherwise. So that's really fun. We haven't done one for a couple months. Dan has actually been in Bogota, Colombia, shooting a new movie that probably should be out around this time next year. And everyone kind of thinks that Hollywood is glamorous. I do not envy his job. His job is very similar to mine, but he's working 18-hour days for like 30 days in a row, and which is something it's pretty stressful. I can imagine. So where did I want to go from there? Actually, can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So I'm going to get weird for a second. I don't know if has anyone here heard of floating?
Mm-hmm. Yes. There's a float spa in town. Yes.
Is there a float spa in town?
There's a float spa in town.
That's awesome. So I go floating. So what that is you get into a tank that kind of looks like a giant toilet, and you lay in 93-degree salt water. It's about 800 pounds of Epsom salt. And so it's skin temperature. You can't feel anything. You're completely floating. You can't feel gravity. You can't see anything because it's dark and you have earplugs in, so you can't hear anything. So this takes meditation to its logical extreme, where all you can do is you're stuck there with your mind. And I will say that you'll do it for about 45 to 90 minutes. And I do this probably about once a month. And it can be agony when you're in there because you're just like, oh God, my mind will not stop racing. But what happens is when you get out, you feel completely refreshed. You feel like colors are brighter. You're completely relaxed. And I do it for the mental benefits, but also there's a lot of people that, if you have a knee problem, back problem, it can really alleviate that kind of thing. So that's really fun. What I want to do, which this even makes the floating people think that I'm crazy, is I've just tried this past week a VR setup inside the tank. And if you're thinking, well, is this the Matrix? It is. So I really think that this may be a thing. At least it was a very popular movie. So what I did was I took what's called a divorce dive. It's basically a Google Cardboard that's that's made out of plastic. I put my phone in it in a waterproof bag. I just got some waterproof headphones. I haven't tried them out. But you calibrate it by adjusting the lenses inside it, and then you put it on your face. I have a few different videos. One is of my friend's video game called Sound Self, which is a game. And what that is it shows a visualization in front of you. You hum a tone, and it reverberates that tone back into your ears and changes the visualization. So this is something where you start to lose yourself and you start to forget who you are. And that's an experience that you previously can only be attained by psychedelic drugs. But this is completely safe. You can almost get to that kind of experience. And it's something that is, as far as I know, I'm the only one in the world who have tried this. If you know anyone, I like to say that because I want someone else to come out of the woodwork and be like, no, I've tried this before. And then I can talk to them. Found God, I guess, and started to put a Jesus robe on, and now stands at the Love Park and takes a lot of pictures of people. But I don't know. LA's got a lot of characters. We've got one.
Well, if you're doing VR and assault bath, you're a filling character too.
Yeah, I guess so.
So maybe do a little GoPro action. Are you ready to?
That
reminds me of that movie where that guy turned back evolution. Help me out.
Altered States. Yep.
One of the best movies. You should watch that in there.
I have seen that movie. It would make you not want to do it. He turns into a monkey. Spoiler alert.
Be that fast if you get the ride.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do a little Q&A. House rules. Name something interesting about you, and then your question. So I'll start off. Can you tell us a little bit about your Thailand experience? You just got
Oh, right, yeah. So I realized I was going to have to move out of my house in Northern Liberties. My two roommates, one was moving in with his girlfriend, and the one had to stay in the city, and the lease was up in April. So I thought, oh man, I don't really take a lot of vacations. Like, why don't I spend a month in Thailand, and maybe I'll work a little bit remotely. That was one thing I was very interested in. Was like, how well can you really do the remote work thing full time? And there's a lot of people that work all over the world, and they jump from places in Southeast Asia where it's fairly cheap to live, South America, and I kind of wanted to try that out. So I went to Thailand, went to Bangkok for a week, I went to Chiang Mai for a week, which was absolutely beautiful. It is really hot there, and it's kind of funny. You would think that the Thai people are really used to the heat, and they really were not. They were constantly asking how much I was sweating or how much I was not sweating. Air conditioning is kind of a religion over there. But it was very cool. I think one of it's kind of I don't know, get kind of political for a second. One of the things that I saw there that I thought was actually kind of pretty inspiring was that despite the fact, so they're basically getting hit by 20th century capitalism all at once. So there's tons of wealth flying around and there's tons of disparities. But what I noticed was that because they hadn't had the time to put in all of the different regulations that we have here that do keep us safe, it was also very cheap to live. If you wanted to get a meal that would cost you, $1, you could absolutely do it. And if you were a Thai, you probably were paying a lot less than that. So there was there didn't seem to be a problem with people just getting hungry all over the place. And I feel like
we sort of have that problem in America, and we're kind of pricing people out of food. But I think what I just described was a very like not politically correct way of actually promoting that. So it was something that I was like, it seems like things are working over here, but it would be a culture shock to a lot of people in America. But that was kind of.
So could you make a live co-working or working remotely from there?
I mean, I was gone for a month, and I kind of felt the need to have a home. I don't know that I could do it for like a long time. I think I'd always have to have some place to come back to.
So Philly beats Thailand. Good.
Philly's completely underrated. Yeah.
Maybe some questions about data, making data look great. Mr. Gutman?
Yeah, I had a question. Since meditation and lying in salt tanks and so forth has been an important part of your mental condition, as you said,
Yeah.
could you describe a couple of times when that led you to some important decision about what
Sure.
you were doing in RJ Metrics or related things?
I think it comes to like, I think it's more of maybe there wasn't one particular eureka moment, but I started to notice that the decisions that I was making that were like strategic on behalf of the product were not being made, they weren't being made like right here. They were being made back here somewhere, and they would just kind of like shoot to you. And I think that's what people talk about when they say they have a eureka moment. They can't really rationalize the reasons that they have for making a particular decision, but it just kind of comes to them. So I thought, well, if these states tend to happen, let's say when you're about to wake up, let's say you're hitting the snooze button, that state that you're in is actually pretty valuable. It's sort of a dreamlike state. You're not inhibiting yourself. Part of the flow tank is actually just maintain that state for as long as possible. And I think that's where a lot of your creative horsepower is going into. So what I started to realize is that the more I was in that state, the better my decisions were, and the more thought out they felt. And I will say that like some of the projects that we've embarked on have been stuff where I couldn't rationalize it at the time, but I just knew it was right. And being in this whole tank and doing meditation enhances the opportunity to be in that state. That's the other thing that's really valuable. Not just being able to deal with frustration, but to actually enhance ideation.
How does RJ Metrics reconcile that orientation with the data-driven value product?
That's where the frustration. So honestly, it's like you have to find the depth. And then what that means is like oftentimes I'll have an idea that I'm like, I know this is right, but I can't prove it right now. But usually if you put enough time into it, and there's plenty of people that help at RJ to actually find that data and prove things that But that's what's so funny, and I think it's what's so funny about life is this kind of cognitive dissonance where you may be trying to make a decision from gut, but you're also in an organization that's very data-driven, and you have to reconcile that. And it can't just be one way or the other.
Can you talk about the growth factor at RJ Metrics? Have you been there? How long have you been there?
Since 2011, so we were about 8 to 10 people at the time.
Yeah, so you've been along the ride. Can you kind of give us 3 bullet points about the ups and downs of growing that fast?
I mean, you're in it for the long haul. I think the upside is like when you're small, you can make decisions really, really quickly. But at the same time, it's tougher to execute because of fewer bodies. I think when you're large, the opposite is true, where it's harder to make decisions that are really fast, but once you actually do, you can get a lot of people moving really quickly on something. I think the kind of like the Dunbar's number, which is like you can really only manage 150 relationships at a time individually. When you start to get to 130 at RJ, we're hiring people at a velocity where I still need to make a time to introduce myself and actually sit down with a few people at RJ. And that becomes really tough because you can't manage all of these relationships. You start becoming a fairly large company. And that
manage a team of.
yeah, I'm on the product team, so I've got 3 other peers like myself in that VP product.
All right, any Ben?
I got one. So I'm in a startup, or a kind of startup of startups, and I find wellness and meditation and things that pertain to my own mental health and decision making very incredibly challenging to balance. So can you tell me on like how RJ's culture or your relationships with your leadership team per choices to make healthy decisions throughout, like how do they foster your choices? And
I think it's kind of lead by example. We tend to hire very, very capable and very smart people. So it's kind of like you're around people that are generally making good choices. And I think that kind of reinforces itself. I don't think there's anything you really need to do institutionally. Like you could find a company that maybe does like a yoga day or something like that. And I think that's good if people want to do yoga. But I don't think you really need you have to do that. I think it's just a culture of hiring people that are generally impressive and take care of themselves. You tend to be around, so you're not really around people that are bad examples. So you have some people who might go running during the day, and I think, maybe I've been sitting at my desk too long or something like that. Maybe I should do the same thing here.
maybe small follow-up. Was there any point where you felt like you hit a wall, or you realized that I need to make a move behaviorally in order to allow for more time for meditation or floating or things that really improve the quality of your life?
I feel like throughout the entire story that I told, like it was, like I think I talked about a couple walls, but like it feels like you're hitting a wall like all the time.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I realized, like, wow, I need a tool to deal with this because you can just drive yourself nuts. And you start to realize that those walls aren't even real half the time. But as an aside to that, I think it's really important to kind of like, even though I tend to align myself with the work that I do, it's also important to separate yourself from it. So having things like the podcast, things like just trying out VR, creates a way so that if you have a setback at work, it's not, your entire self-worth is not tied to that one thing. It becomes like a spiral of either fear or something else. So having a lot of different things that can define you, I think, are like it's pretty valuable. And then last question.
In a philosophical sense, do you view your meditation as a practice? Do you view your life as a practice? Or what is the nature of practice for you?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit after this.
It's a great way to end with an unanswerable question.
Yeah.
Well, let's not end that. Jeff's got a question.
I was wondering if there was a spiritual or religious aspect to your worship, to your meditation.
I think so. I'm kind of the mind where I'm just like, I'm not sure what's going on, but I think something's going on, that kind of thing. But I think you can separate that, and you can say you have one very practical tool, which does not need any kind of spirituality to it. That is, it's kind of like, there's an author named Sam Harris, who is, he's like a fairly outspoken atheist. He wrote Waking Up, which is a great book if you're thinking about getting into some meditation. But there's the tool part of it, and then there's there's an entire spiritual part. It can be really useful, and sometimes not useful. I think that I'm kind of thinking about, I have that in my mind, but I'm not really tied to any kind of framework.
I'd like to hook you up with the Alchemy Learning guys. They were the ones to come in here a couple weeks ago and provide some of the first VR experiences to people in this area that we were aware of. But they really are geared towards like using augmented reality and virtual reality for learning.
Yeah.
And it seems like for meditation and even like transcendental learning experiences or health-based experiences, I think that maybe that will be a really cool collaborative point for you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Alrighty,
Thank
so
you.
thanks a lot, Matt, for coming. More coffee, and hopefully see you next week. Have an awesome 4th of July, and ciao.
How are you?
Did you sneak in?